The Rugby League World Cup is one of the oldest World Cups in global sport, dating all the way back to 1954, and it has seen some wonderful moments over the years. Join us here on Zero Tackle as we count down the top 10 Rugby League World Cup moments of all time. Number 10, the sold-out crowds in 2017 as Papua New Guinea play World Cup games on home soil. For the first time ever, Papua New Guinea were able to play Rugby League World Cup matches on home soil, and the local fans turned out in their droves. Only one of two countries on the planet where rugby league is the national sport, Papua New Guinea drew in a sold-out 14,800 people at all three of their group stage games, where they managed to defeat Wales, Ireland and the USA. Their inspirational run went on to the quarter-final stage. They unfortunately were defeated by England in Melbourne, but the image of the World Cup games being played in Port Moresby won't be forgotten by any rugby league fan anytime soon. Number 9, the only final that didn't feature the Kangaroos. Stretching right back to the very first Rugby League World Cup for number 9, and it would be the first, and up until 2021, the last time Australia failed to reach the final. It was a tournament where Australia fell to Great Britain and the hosts, France, during the group stage. The hosts wouldn't go on to win the tournament though, with Great Britain running out 16 points to 12 winners in a tight final at the Parc des Princes in Paris. Number 8, Tonga pushed New Zealand to the brink in a 1-point thriller. Another game between Tonga and New Zealand will feature on this list, but their almost win in 1995 before the rise of the Pacific Island nations as a genuine rugby league power was thrilling. The sides clashed in Warrington to open the group stage, with only a Matthew Ridge field goal able to split the two sides at the death. Number 7, Australia and England draw at the Sydney Cricket Ground. The 1970s and 80s saw a handful of tournaments without a fixed host, and 1975 was one of those tournaments, with games played in France, England, Australia, New Zealand and Wales. However, it was a game between Australia and England in mid-June at the Sydney Cricket Ground which took the headlines, with the two fierce rivals tying 10 points apiece. Number 6, Australia and New Zealand play out extra time in a semi-final. 1995 had plenty of incredible moments, and while the Kangaroos would ultimately win the tournament, it only came after an extra time semi-final win against New Zealand. With the scores locked after 80 minutes at 20 all, it took 2 tries from Australia during the extra time period to book their place in the tournament decider. Steve Menzies, Tim Brasher, Mark Coyne, Terry Hill and Brad Fittler all hit the score sheet for the Kangaroos. Number 5, Australia win thriller over Great Britain in the final. The Kangaroos went through the 1977 group stage without dropping a game, but the final against Great Britain will go down as one of the all-time greats. Played again at the hallowed turf of the SCG in the days of 3-point tries, 2 missed goals from Michael Cronin almost cost the Kangaroos, but they would ultimately win on the back of an early lead and late defence that stood tall. Number 4, New Zealand stun Australia in final. The Kiwis have been blown out by Australia in the group stage of the 2008 World Cup, losing 30 points to 6. So when the two teams met again in the final, Australia, in the era of Billy Slater, Jonathan Thurston, Darren Lockyer, Cameron Smith and Greg Inglis, were heavy favourites. That isn't at all how the game turned out though. Despite running on 2 early tries, Australia weren't able to hold on. New Zealand ran on 3 tries in the final 20 minutes of the game to ensure a 14-point victory at Suncorp Stadium. Number 3, New Zealand fall to Tonga and Fiji back-to-back. In terms of major Rugby League World Cup boilovers, it doesn't get much bigger than the Kiwis' dramatic collapse in 2017. Beating Samoa and Scotland in their opening 2 games, the Kiwis would then fall to Tonga 28-22 in the final group stage match before stunningly losing to Fiji in a low-scoring affair 4-2 in the quarterfinals. Both of those games were played on New Zealand soil. Penalty goals were the difference, with no tries scored in the knockout encounter. Number 2, the drawn final between Australia and Great Britain. 1972 was the second and to date last time France would host the World Cup. But this time, the hosts didn't make the final, losing to Great Britain and Australia in the group stage, although they did manage to defeat New Zealand. That left the Kangaroos and Great Britain, who had played each other in 3 of the 5 finals to date, to square off in the tournament decider. A game that went back and forth from the get-go, the score would ultimately wind up 10-all. In the days of no golden point, 20 minutes of extra time couldn't separate the teams, with Great Britain being declared champions after defeating Australia in the group stage. And our number 1 Rugby League World Cup moment of all time, Shaun Johnson knocks out England at Wembley. Let's set the scene for a moment for number 1. 2013 semi-finals, Wembley Stadium, almost 70,000 people in attendance. England carrying the weight of a nation up against New Zealand, the defending champions. The two nations trade barbs during the opening hour of proceeding, with New Zealand leading 14 points to 12 as 20 minutes to go ticks past on the clock. Sam Burgess scores with just 13 minutes to go, and England now lead by 4. The rest, as they say, is history, with the Kiwi scoring a miraculous last-minute try through Shaun Johnson, who then calmly converts to win New Zealand the game and advance them to the final.